looking, throwing in the end zone.
Montana, touchdown, John Taylor.
Young to the air, Young to Jerry Rice, touchdown San Francisco.
Young stumbles on the way back and fires up the middle. Pass is caught by Owens.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm your host, Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion and analysis, plus timely and entertaining sports and pop culture topics. And today we're going to be talking about 49ers training camp officially kicking off and what the camp battles are on offense. Throughout offense, QB, receiver, running back, tight end, and O-line, we will break it all down. More on Brandon Aiyuk, not necessarily contract drama, but 5 teams that were potentially interested in trading for Aiyuk. Dan Orlovsky and Ryan Clark with some very casual takes on ESPN, and Spotrac giving a very old estimate on what Brandon Aiyuk's contract may be worth. And we'll conclude the 49ers section with Steve Young on his assessment of Brock's game and how he sees it evolving. In the plus section, we're going to be giving reviews and thoughts of Season 1 of Star Wars The Acolyte, Season 4 of Amazon Prime's The Boys, and Season 6, Part 1 of Cobra Kai. But like always, it starts with the Niners, so let's get right into it.
Let's talk Niners!
So today, Tuesday, July 23rd, officially kicks off 49ers training camp. Veterans reporting, rookies reporting last week, and as complete of a roster and team that the 49ers have, there are position battles and jobs to be won. Today or this week, we're going to be discussing what those jobs are going to be on offense, and basically they are all backup jobs. The starters are solidified, but there are good backup battles throughout the offense and throughout the team as well. Next week is when we're going to dive into the defense. And again, position battles, depth position battles at essentially every position. D-line, D-end, linebackers, cornerbacks. Safety might be the most clear-cut, but just given Hufanga's injury, there could be some jockeying for starting one of the starting safety spots if Hufanga is not ready to go. But that is next week. Today, we're going to be talking about the offensive battles, and let's start at quarterback. And contrary to what Larry Krueger believes, Josh Dobbs is your guaranteed backup quarterback. Now, guaranteed unless he obviously sustained some sort of an injury. He was paid $2.25 million on a 1-year contract. It is fully guaranteed. He is not going anywhere, nor is he getting bumped down to QB3 in favor of either Brandon Allen or undrafted rookie free agent Tanner Mordecai out of Wisconsin. Allen versus Mordecai is the ultimate, or is essentially the battle for quarterback 3. And it's possible, although I think unlikely, that both players make the team, one on the 53 as QB3, one on the practice squad. But I think 4 quarterbacks is essentially overkill, and an extra spot on the 53-man roster is more important given what the Niners have numbers-wise at some other positions. So let's go over some of the financials. Brandon Allen is a veteran, was with the team last year, served as the number 3 quarterback. Cutting Brandon Allen saves the 49ers $840,000 on the cap. Should Tanner Mordecai make the team on the 53 as QB3, he would essentially cost, I believe, $806,000 for his contract. So in that player swap out, they save $34,000. I think that's an amount that's nice for any one of us in terms of any sort of salary increase or bonus. But that's pennies when it comes to the 49ers, and that salary difference is not going to be a driver for making any sort of decision between the two. Brandon Allen has a better chance of ending up on another team's active roster than Tanner Mordecai does. Tanner Mordecai has a chance of making another team's practice squad if the 49ers completely waive him and do not add him to their team in any capacity. There is that possibility. Developmental quarterback. He's not going to make it to another team's active roster to start the season if the 49ers don't want him. I just don't see it. Mordecai started out at SMU, finished his career at Wisconsin, and of course, in rookie OTAs, spring minicamp, everybody looks good. Did you hear really one negative review about anybody, any rookies when it came to rookie minicamp or OTAs? The only one I could think of was rookie running back Isaac Guerendo not having his footing and not being able to find the openings on the offensive line. But is anyone pissing on any of their rookies at this point? Certainly not any 49er beat reporters, content creators, anybody that has access to practices. This is the season of pumping everybody up. Until you get into training camp, then we're going to see some separation. But Mordecai looked great, and all these rookies looked great across the league. It is the season, or it has been the season of perpetual hope. And since we're talking about quarterbacks, I got into a back and forth with some Denver Bronco fans who just refuse to believe that their poverty franchise is not going anywhere anytime soon. And, I just made this statement responding to someone that saying like, hey, I think Bo Nix was a reach in the first round, regardless if Sean Payton loved him or not. He was the sixth quarterback off the board. And then, of course, these brain children bring up examples of, well, no one thought Patrick Mahomes was going to be good, and the Chiefs traded up for him, and Dan Marino was the sixth quarterback off the board. Way to use a Hall of Famer and a generational quarterback as your examples, because those are the exceptions, right? They're not the rule. Every year, half or more of first-round quarterbacks flame out. Now, I'm not hoping that on Bo Nix. I have nothing against the Denver Broncos. They are a who-gives-a-shit franchise in the NFL. Just nothing interesting about them. It's them. It's the Titans. Gives a shit about that franchise. It's the Saints, especially with Dennis Allen at head coach. Nobody cares about that. Commanders, for now, even though they have Jaden Daniels, they're like, there's a Commanders game on. Do you really want to watch that? Outside of the rookie maybe doing something. These are just go nowhere franchises. And I followed up, I guess I had to double down saying that the Broncos may have the worst quarterback room in recent memory. It's Bo Nix, it's Zach Wilson, and it's Jarrett Stidham. Really. There's no veteran anybody can lean on. Jarrett Stidham is not your, steady hand veteran. He's competing for a starting spot. I guess so is Zach Wilson, but they have their own battles at quarterback. Let's get back to San Francisco. In terms of a prediction, my prediction is there's only two quarterbacks on the 53. It's Brock and it's Josh Dobbs. Whoever they decide to keep on the practice squad, to me, it ultimately only matters if either Dobbs or Purdy gets hurt, and then they have to elevate that quarterback to the 53, either with, 3 standard elevations, and then after that, they have to make a decision on just keep him on the practice squad or elevate him fully to the 53. I keep saying it, and I truly don't believe there will be 3 quarterbacks on the active roster. Do I have a preference for QB3? No, because if all things go as planned, Brock Purdy will have another full season. And remember, under Shanahan, the 2 seasons he's had the same quarterback start every meaningful game in 2019 and 23, they went to the Super Bowl. Now, I said meaningful game because Brock Purdy did not play in week 18 last year against the Rams. They had nothing to play for, so Sam Darnold played instead. If they can get good health out of Purdy, they're going to make obviously another deep run. QB3 is a non-issue. I have no preference for either one of them, but I don't think either are going to make the 53. Now, running back, backup running back. And let's be clear here, guys. Eli Mitchell is the backup. Regardless of how good Jordan Mason, Isaac Guerendo, Cody Schrader, Patrick Taylor look in the preseason and training camp, Kyle's got a pseudo man crush on Eli Mitchell. He's not going anywhere. And it doesn't even matter. You can't use the excuse, well, it's the last year of his contract. Let's see what you can get for Mitchell because he's going to be gone anyway next year. Every one of these years that the Niners are going to feel this talented of a roster, and there's going to be replenishing and replacing going on after this season, undoubtedly. They're trying to win a Super Bowl. They're a better team with Eli Mitchell on the roster than off of it. He is your backup. The camp battle is going to be for running back 3, and that's Jordan Mason versus the rookie Isaac Guerendo. And Guerendo has an uphill battle, not because he couldn't find his footing in OTAs and minicamp. Doesn't matter. That was his first taste of an NFL offense, NFL playbook. Probably his feet and legs were going too quick for his mind to catch up because everything is just so overwhelming. But that's your battle, right? And Mason, I keep saying on the podcast, has the upper hand due to special teams. He's a hard runner. He could be a closer, someone that can get more carries out of the gate than Isaac Guerendo. And I would not be surprised, and I guess it is my prediction, that Mason's running back 3 and Guerendo's running back 4 and is going to be inactive on game days. Doesn't mean he's a bust. I'm trying to preach level-headed approaches to stuff and not just knee-jerk emotional reactions when something doesn't go, your way or what, maybe someone's thoughts are. It's still a strong running back stable. Guerendo is a pick for this year. He can certainly help, and maybe he gets on the field with kickoff returns, and maybe they keep 4 running backs active. They would have to take away somewhere else. Maybe only have 3 tight ends active. Who knows? But he's a pick for this year, running back insurance, running back depth, and for next year, in essence, taking his slot, not in the pecking order, but the slot of Eli Mitchell, who will be gone after this year. The other battle, if you want to think about it, Cody Schrader, undrafted rookie out of Missouri against Patrick Taylor, free agent pickup from the Packers. If the Niners carry 4 running backs on the active roster, I don't think they need 2 running backs on the practice squad. So these 2 players could be battling for a position on the practice squad. And if that's the case, I think Schrader probably has the upper hand, given that he is a younger back, smaller back than Patrick Taylor. You're going like 5'8", 205 for Schrader versus like 6'2", 210, 215 for Taylor. But I think there's something to be said for youth and someone that is self-made, a walk-on at Missouri that could be running back 3/4 next year. Should he stick on the practice squad all season? He could show out really well in the preseason, during cuts, get picked up by someone's active roster. That's very possible, and it is for Patrick Taylor too. Who knows if any teams are going to experience any injuries? But I don't think Schrader, outside of injury to the Niners, finds his way to the 53, no matter how much anybody wants to say, dark horse, undrafted rookie free agent, he's going to make the team. I don't think he is, guys. You got CMC, you got Eli Mitchell that Shanahan loves. He trusts Mason, who plays special teams, and they drafted a 3rd-round pick. No matter how Guerendo looks, no matter how Schrader looks, Schrader's not making the 53. But I hope he sticks around on the practice squad because he could be an interesting piece of running back depth on the 53 next year. At receiver, you got 5 locks. It's Aiyuk, Debo, Jennings, Pearsall, and Cowing. I think they're going to carry 6 receivers because there's a lot of talent, and the battle's going to come down between Chris Conley, Ronnie Bell, Danny Gray, and Trent Taylor. Trent Taylor may have the outside or the inside advantage if you're thinking about maybe horse racing or track and field, obviously wanting to stay on the inside lane, cutting your distance down, speed and time-wise, because he's a sure-handed punt returner. Ronnie Bell was not that last year. They did not ask Chris Conley to, and Danny Gray has been more or less MIA the past 2 years. How Pearsall looks, how Cowings looks, if they get reps at punt return, could go a long way in determining if Trent Taylor makes the roster. Chris Conley is a veteran that I think you could easily sneak onto the practice squad, and a team could pluck him if they need receiver help, but that did not happen at all last year. And he stayed on the Niners practice squad and was elevated toward the end of the season, and obviously was in part of the active roster for playoffs and Super Bowl. Ronnie Bell, I think still, even after, again, this was a rookie year for a 7th round pick, played, I think, decently or relatively well given the time he was out there, had a couple touchdowns, was not sure-handed at punt return. And if Trent Taylor does make the team as the punt returner, that means maybe Jacob Cowing, the rookie, is going to be inactive on game days because they might not keep 6 receivers active. So it almost behooves the Niners to have either Pearsall or Cowing be the punt returner because you keep 2 dynamic young receivers viable on game days. Trent Taylor can operate out of the slot. You know, he had a nice intro tenure to the league when the Niners drafted him out of Louisiana State, then went to Cincinnati. He can, Jennings is the slot until obviously further notice, but he can play some slot, shifty, but not explosive. Wasn't really explosive his first couple years, less explosive now given age, but has punt return security on his side. I think while earlier on I thought maybe Ronnie Bell had the inside advantage to making the roster, I think unless Pearsall or Cowing show that they can be relied upon for punt returns, it might be Trent Taylor's job to lose, in which case maybe they can keep a Chris Conley and a Ronnie Bell on a practice squad. If Ronnie Bell gets released, I could see him being picked up by another team. At this point, though, wide receiver 5 or 6 are a dime a dozen. You may want to go with someone that had experience in your camp, preseason, etc., then somebody else. So you can maybe see a situation, because Bell only has 1 year of experience, where Conley and Bell can make the practice squad. Tay Martin and Tariq Owens, I could see one of them, potentially both making the practice squad because of their youth, and you have 10 spots open for players with 2 or less years of NFL experience. Both of those players qualify. They're fighting for the practice squad, nothing more. Now let's move to tight end. Not an underrated move. I think a really strong move of signing Logan Thomas from the Commanders. Is he automatically tight end 2? Well, there's a lot that goes into the thought of tight end 2. It's not just receiving. It's being an all-around tight end 2, blocking-wise as well. Thomas, bigger body, little older than Kittle. I think he's 32. Had a good season for Washington last year. 55 receptions, 496 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And the year before that, 39 for 323 and 1 score. He may not be, based on who everybody else that's on the roster, he actually might be the best all-around tight end 2, but we'll see in what Shanahan expects out of blocking, and it's really the George Kittle show, if he's going to hold off Cam Latu, Braden Willis, or Eric Saubert. Let's make the assumption that Logan Thomas is tight end 2. Now, Latu or Willis or Saubert, whoever makes the roster, might be tight end 2 blocking, but Logan Thomas is tight end 2 receiving. But let's just give Logan Thomas the tight end 2 moniker. Best tight end 2 that the Niners have had in the Shanahan regime. And, I think it's going to be Latu and both Latu and Braden Willis, second-year players that are going to stick on the roster. The Niners do need youth at tight end that they can groom. And not that they're going to take over for Kittle in the next year or two. I think after this season, Kittle does get a contract extension, as does, I think, Fred Warner, to lower their cap hits in 2025 to help accommodate Aiyuk's upcoming extension and Brock Purdy's extension in the offseason. Any other players, obviously, they want to sign free agents, their own, others are draft picks. So I don't think Kittle is going anywhere. Everyone's saying, Kittle, they have to prepare for life without Kittle. Travis Kelce is 4 years older than Kittle. And he just signed an extension, last season? Not to say that he's going to play out every year of it, but I think Kittle has more in the tank than people think. And I think when he gets that new extension, I think Shanahan will take the approach with Kittle of easing his workload, easing his blocking, maybe making him more of a glorified slot receiver. Thinking about his usage as Shanahan has stated he wants to think about McCaffrey's usage now that he's gotten that extension moving forward. So you're still getting a productive player in year 2, 3, and potentially 4 of that extension. So I think Cam Latu and Braden Willis will be the two players, will be tight ends 3 and 4. Whoever's going to be tight end 3, I don't know. Does it really matter? They're interchangeable at that point. I think Eric Saubert is an interesting dark horse to potentially make the roster. Should Latu have a setback with the knee or Braden Willis, something happens, another veteran tight end. But I think it feels right to have 2 veterans in Kittle and Logan Thomas and 2 younger players in Latu and Willis. Undrafted rookie free agent Mason Pline out of Furman will be battling Jake Tongs on the practice squad. There's a possibility that both can make it. I think they only keep one of these 2 younger players. Mason Pline, big target again. People raving about him in OTAs with a helmet on and shorts and no pads and no one really covering him. Minimal football experience. Let's not get too enamored with the rookies, the underdogs. I'm always pulling for underdogs too, but we have to give ourselves at least a teaspoon, if not a tablespoon, of reality in understanding that this is a player that might be a year or 2 away from helping out on the active roster. So stashing Pline, and I would prefer Pline over Jake Tongs just again, and I'll go that youth angle, that unexpected, like what can Mason Pline provide angle, but those 2 battling it out on the practice squad. The O-line, until further notice, guys, set in stone is Trent Williams, it's Aaron Banks, it's Jake Brendel, John Feliciano, and Colton McKivitz. No matter what you think of McKivitz or anybody else, those are your starters, unless there's an injury. Here's where the battles are going to take place. For tackle 3, your swing tackle, it's between Jalen Moore, Chris Hubbard, and Brandon Parker. So Jalen Moore is in the last year of his deal, played predominantly on the left side, but of the 3, he probably has the best chance at true swing tackle experience or being called up as the swing tackle should Williams or McKivitz get hurt. McKivitz hasn't gotten hurt the past couple seasons, so you don't know if Jalen Moore would fill in on the right side, but he did fill in for Trent Taylor for 3 games last year and the year before. Chris Hubbard was brought in from the Titans, has right tackle experience. He's probably, I don't want to call him tackle 4, but I think the Niners are going to keep 2 tackles like they did last year. And I think Jalen Moore will be the direct backup to Trent Williams, and Chris Hubbard will be the direct backup for Colton McKivitz. Brandon Parker was brought in from the Raiders, has been injury prone, does have tackle experience, could be someone that sticks on the practice squad. Or again, if Moore or Hubbard get hurt in front of him, he is one of the front runners to be maybe the tackle behind Colton McKivitz. Guard. Now, if people want to be adamant that there might be a battle to be had between Dominic Puni, Spencer Burford, and John Feliciano for the starting right guard spot, sure, I'm not going to, poo-poo on that too much. But they brought Feliciano back for a reason, and that reason is consistency. He is an older player. I think he called this the last rodeo, so this might be his last year regardless. So Dominic Puni could be groomed for either guard spot, right? Aaron Banks, the left guard, this is his last year as well. So Puni has the inside track on starting next year in either guard spot. But in terms of the first guard off the bench, should Banks or Feliciano get hurt, Puni, Ben Barch, Nick Sakiel, Spencer Burford, or 6th round pick Jarrett Kingston out of USC. I think this is Dominic Puni's job to lose. I think Ben Barch, the team likes. He has experience, plucked from the Jaguars practice squad last season, immediately onto the active roster or the 53-man roster. He might have been inactive the first week just to get familiarized with the playbook. And I think he is a player also that could be re-signed and one of the starting guards next year. The Niners' philosophy is not spending big on the offensive line outside of Trent Williams. Banks is on a rookie deal. McKivitz got a modest extension. Brendel, a modest extension for a center. And Feliciano, a very, very modest deal at right guard. When Trent Williams retires, and it's going to suck for the line and Brock Purdy when he does, that, $25 million cap hit could be spread out. Maybe they get a $7-8 million guard or, a $7 or $8 million center. Like, they can spread that money out, but it seems when that day comes that they're probably going to go, I don't want to say bargain bin, but more affordable, maybe youth. And it seems like they want to put more of their financial resources into skill positions and the D-line, which is fine. You have to make choices and concessions everywhere when you're trying to build a roster. So Dominic Puni I can see as guard number 3, and I think it's going to be Ben Barch, honestly, as guard 4. I think Zakiel and Buford get cut outright. And I think Jarrett Kingston, unless he shows out really well. Listen, if Ben Barch and Jarrett Kingston are close, then maybe they keep Kingston because he's under contract for 4 years and Ben Barch at a very reasonable number, and Ben Barch is under contract for 1 year. It's definitely possible. But I think more Hubbard at tackle, Puni, Barch at guard, and Kingston can end up on the practice squad. Zakiel or Spencer Buford could as well, because again, you could have up to 6 players with an unlimited amount of years-wise of NFL experience. And then 3 other players fighting for the practice squad, undrafted rookie free agents, Drake Nugent out of Michigan, Brayson Mays, and Sebastian Gutierrez. Drake Nugent, yes, he played for Michigan and Jim Harbaugh. Yes, he won a national championship. Yes, he is undersized, and people are trying to make the Kelsey comparison, the center for the Eagles. Guys, everybody relax. This is a learning year for Drake Nugent. I think his best spot would be on the practice squad, and potentially, if the Niners are looking to cut costs next year, or if he shows a lot of growth in next offseason's program, then he maybe takes over for Jake Brendel or as a backup. But if he's going to be a backup, he's got to play guard also. The Niners are not going to spend a roster spot on someone who solely is a center or a backup center. Mays and Gutierrez, I think, wind up being cut outright. And the international pathway player, Isaac Alarcon, will be on the practice squad. So that's how we're looking training camp battle-wise. I'm excited to see it, guys, as we're listening to feedback, as we are, reading articles about how players performed each day of minicamp. Everyone chill out. Don't jump the gun. Don't have knee-jerk reactions to things. You know that Grant Cohn and his Cohn cronies are just chomping at the bit to have, drum up controversy whenever they can or have things to talk about when there's really not that much to talk about. That's why this podcast is once a week until we get into preseason games. Then I'll be going into twice a week through the end of the season. But Cohn and his cronies will be keeping track of completions and incompletions and interceptions and tracking balls that are thrown by Purdy and the other quarterbacks to build the case that Purdy's not sharp or other quarterbacks should be given a chance or blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter, guys. Other than these backup fringe battles, and that's what we're going to call them, backup player, bottom of the roster type battles. It doesn't matter if Deebo Samuel gets hit in the face with a football every time he runs a route. He's a starter. Doesn't matter if Colton McKivitz gets beaten a couple times each practice. He's the starting right tackle. Like Eli Mitchell, there are things just are the way they are, and it's not sexy to have a rational, level-headed approach to what the team is and where the actual positions, backup positions that are up for grabs are. Sometimes we don't need to make more of it than it actually is. This was voted by Pro Football Focus or ESPN, I forget, as the top roster in the NFL. And that essentially means the top, like the starters, the starters are the top, is what pushes the roster over the top, right? No one gets, a top 10 ranking because, the starters are marginal, but look at that depth. Look at that depth. That's why that's a top 10 roster. Defensive starters across the board, not good. But those backups, let me tell you, no, it's starters, and the Niners have some good depth in a lot of areas. this season. So let's transition from training camp battles. A little bit of talk about Brandon Aiyuk. We're not going to get into the contract all that much, but I just have some thoughts on Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk saying that there were 5 teams around the time of the draft that were willing to trade for and pay Brandon Aiyuk $28 million a year. Didn't say who they were. It's not like you are giving up your source by naming teams, so that's just odd that he didn't. And compensation varied from team to team. But let's just remember that Brandon Aiyuk formally requesting a trade means nothing. Nothing. Since 3 months ago, the Niners gave Aiyuk and his agent permission to sniff around and see what was available. And they didn't trade him then. They're not going to trade him now. So this whole requesting a trade thing is a big nothing burger. But thinking about the 5 teams, so 3 teams that have been bandied about, the Commanders, and that was bandied about even before Aiyuk was, going to practice with quarterback Daniels and posting stuff on Instagram, etc. The Patriots, around time of the draft, they offered a second for Brandon Aiyuk. Are you serious? If you were willing to offer him $28 million a year, do you think a second-round pick is commensurate compensation for a $28 million wide receiver? No! Pittsburgh. They just got rid of Deontay Johnson. They want to pick up a more expensive receiver. Now, Brandon Aiyuk is better than Deontay Johnson. Don't get me wrong. And Justin Fields or Russell Wilson need all the help they can get because that's a team that's probably going to finish last in the AFC North, 3rd place, best case scenario. And I know that there's, Steeler reporters saying trust me, bro. Trust me, bro. I got sources. Things are happening this week, bro. Things are happening next week, bro. Nothing's happening. So even though I'm recording this podcast in my basement, I think the reception in your basement, bro, is not that good because nothing's happening based on your sources. Gotta love internet big guys, internet scoop breakers. If you were that good, you wouldn't be on Reddit. You wouldn't be on Twitter or X. You'd actually have a paying job in this sport, but you don't, just like I don't. So Washington, New England, and Pittsburgh. So now, who else could it be? And I'm going to leave it at 5 teams. Maybe Carolina. I'd have to look at the draft pick compensation after the whole, trading up, to get their quarterback and bringing, sending DJ Moore to the Bears. But Carolina, outside of what Adam Thielen is just putrid at receiver and skill positions. Money wise, they can do it. They didn't wind up signing Brian Burns. They actually got a 1st-round pick from the Giants for Brian Burns. So they might have the compensation. They might have the money to do it. But do you want to go there, Brandon? Is an extra $1.5 million a year so important to you that you would go to poverty franchises like Carolina, New England? Don't let the last, 23 years fool you. That's a poverty franchise. They are gonna suck. Washington, yeah, there's a little buzz and excitement about them. Right now they're battling for 3rd best in the East with the Giants. And Pittsburgh, again, 3rd best in the North behind Baltimore, Cincinnati, and Cleveland. Chargers were another team that I thought could be a possibility. Now, this isn't like a Harbaugh connection with the Niners, nothing like that. And then when you take a step back and you say, well, they needed to shed money. So they cut Mike Williams, who was injured. That's an easy cut. I hate to say it, but it was. And traded Keenan Allen to Chicago. Are they going to take on that salary? Now, yeah, if they trade for him and sign him to an extension, the first 2 years of the extension will be very reasonable. Much more reasonable than what the tail end of Mike Williams or Keenan Allen's contracts and cap hits were. And the Chargers, could be a wild card team where if things break right for them, meaning Patrick Mahomes gets hurt for half the year, that they could win the West, right? Harbaugh, they're going to play better defense. They're going to be more well-coached than they ever were under Brandon Staley. They're going to run the ball. They're going to control the clock. They're not going to beat themselves. But are they going to have enough? Do they have enough firepower to beat a Chiefs team? Denver, bad. Raiders, bad. They're the second best team, obviously, in the West by far. But are they going to pay that money and that compensation for Aiyuk? I don't think so. Now look at all those teams. Of those teams, you have one, the Chargers, that might be a playoff team. Said it on last week's podcast. I know people agree with this sentiment. This whole grass isn't always greener. How much is it worth to you as a player, Brandon Aiyuk, to you listening, jobs, whatever, to chase a ring? You'll essentially be chasing rings for your entirety in San Francisco. And by entirety, I mean, he's probably going to get a 3-year contract extension, right? When he signs. I don't think it'll be more than that. They may go to 4 or 5 years, 2 void years, 2 dummy years in the back end to spread out the hit. But I think that it's safe to say the Niners will be in contention for the next 3 years to chase a ring in an NFC that is not nearly as strong as the AFC. New England, garbage. Pittsburgh, mediocre. Chargers, who knows? Now, it was also brought up, Brandon Aiyuk for Devontae Adams to the Raiders. Now, again, do you want to go to the Raiders where there's really not much happening? You're in the division with the Chiefs and the Chargers. You're not going to sniff the playoffs. It's Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell at quarterback. And the more I'm watching, I don't want to make the trade because I'm under the impression that I've been on record saying that they're going to re-sign Aiyuk. In the next 2-3 weeks, they're going to re-sign Brandon Aiyuk. Devontae Adams is under contract for, I think, 3 more seasons, including this one upcoming. He's 31, he's closer to the end than the start, obviously, but still a very, very good top 5 receiver in the league. Probably number one or two route runner. But watching him on that Netflix show Receiver, he's not a diva. I can't say that. But when, his statement about I measure, something like the whole, his greatness isn't measured in wins as losses. It's in, perfection and basically his stats and his performance doesn't sound like a buy into situation where his numbers may quote unquote suffer like Aiyuk's has on San Francisco because of all the weapons they have. Now, if Adams really, really, really wants a ring, maybe on a team like San Francisco, he would just shut up and ball and block and do what was asked of him. For the foreseeable future, I would rather have the younger ascending receiver than still a very, very good receiver. An excellent receiver, but who's on the back 9. He is. And I saw something, Bleacher Report, I forget what the compensation was, but suggested that the Niners trade Aiyuk to the Lions. So let's trade your number 1 receiver to a conference rival who you may have to play again to get to the Super Bowl this year. That's a smart trade. Very astute thinking by whoever put out this bullshit at Bleacher Report. If you're going to make trade scenarios, make them realistic. I don't think he's going to be traded at all, but if he is, he's not going to be traded to an NFC team, and he's not going to be traded to a good team, in which case, Brandon, you should be like, thanks for sniffing around, agent, but I'm good, let's stay. And he's going to stay at a number that I'm going to get to, in a minute or two. Then we had ESPN casuals Dan Orlovsky and Ryan Clark making these brilliant statements saying that Brock Purdy would suffer without Brandon Aiyuk. No shit. Any quarterback on the planet at any level of quarterback play, pro, college, UFL, high school, peewee, flag, touch football, would suffer if they lost their best receiver. Are we talking about a monumental collapse of the team? No, but the team would feel it. How would they not? If you were to put in Chris Conley instead of Brandon Aiyuk as your swap out, yeah, there'd be a difference. I probably wouldn't expect more than, 800 receivers receiving yards out of Conley versus Aiyuk might be good for 12 or 1,300 or more. Talking, 30 to 40% drop off. And Dan Orlovsky saying that the Rams would win the West if Brandon Aiyuk was there. One, I wouldn't really go that far, but why don't you turn it around saying, do the Rams have any shot of winning the West if Puka Nacua gets hurt, if Cooper Kupp gets hurt, if Kyron Williams gets hurt at running back? You take away a dynamic player, it's going to impact the team. How much it impacts wins and losses, I don't know. Is there an NFL wins above replacement, a war stat for receivers? There might be. I'm not subscribed to Pro Football Focus. I don't know, but casual takes. And I think Dan Orlovsky has had some good takes at times. Ryan Clark has had some good takes at times, and probably more often than not. I'm not going to shit on them and say they're garbage. But making the statement that Purdy would suffer without no shit. Ryan Clark, I think the Steelers defense suffered when you were a starter for them and they put the backup in. Now, maybe it was a 10%, 20% drop off, whatever it is. But they suffered. Dan Orlovsky, I can't say that because you were never a starter. And as a Lion quarterback, you ran out of the back of the end zone. So I don't know what I'm going to tell you there. Now, one last thing to conclude the Aiyuk section. Spotrac had a contract estimate for Brandon Aiyuk, and this was last week, a handful of days ago. And they're estimating, contract value being 4 years, $104.6 million, which is $26.15 annually. It would make him the 8th highest paid wide receiver behind Cooper Kupp's $26.7 million average. Now, how they calculate these valuations, I know they use comparables, whether it's, production, age, targets, whatever it may be, that they may grab a couple people above Aiyuk statistically, below him, above him age-wise, younger than him, whatever it may be. And it's just funny that Spotrac's $26.15 million average was what the Niners offered in May 2 months ago. But it is also odd that knowing that Aiyuk is not going to sign for $26 million, I don't think that 0.15 puts it over the top, Spotrac, and will have Aiyuk sign. So I've been on record saying that he's going to be re-signed, and I think they average it out at $28.5 million a year, puts him just above Jalen Waddle, and puts him either 4th or 5th for average annual value, which is, if that's a 4th or 5th ranking there, he's not the 4th or 5th best receiver in the league, even being as important to San Francisco as he is. The market either dictates, what you're worth, or it overvalues actually where you are based on your production. It's just hey, the market's moving, so I should be paid more. Okay, fine. Just interesting that Spotrac came out with something so recently that was turned down by Aiyuk and his representative, that they just wouldn't have upped it a bit to maybe 4 years, $115 million. To get an extra $2 million plus in there. And I think that's where they're going to net out and settle. Now, lastly, in the 49ers section, Steve Young had some thoughts on Brock Purdy and how his game might evolve in the coming years. And some quotes from Steve Young. Quote, "There are free yards in today's wide open game. It's a different game than 20 years ago. Guys can get to them, those yards, with their legs in key moments. Brock needs to think about spitting out 50 or 60 yards a game with his legs." All right, now far be it for me to correct Steve Young as a Hall of Fame player and one of my favorite players and a key player responsible for the 49ers' last, Super Bowl win. But if Brock ran for 50 yards a game, that would mean he'd run for 850 yards on the season. Or if you take out, say, week 17, say they sit him if they have a bye or not, 800 yards on the year. That ain't happening. That ain't happening. Now, could there be a game where he has 50 yards rushing? Sure. A couple, 3-4 scrambles at, 10 yards apiece. Yeah. I think if you want to talk about an average, I think somewhere between 25 and 35 yards a game on average would be reasonable. Make defenses respect Brock's elusiveness, pocket awareness, and mobility, especially on third downs. And, if 20 yards a game winds up being, 300, 340-ish yards a year, I can see that. I can't see Brock rushing for more than 500 yards in a season. I just can't. Can you? He doesn't have that element to his game to be that dynamic or that productive, but I agree with Steve Young that take a page out of the NFC playoff playbook, because he ran more then than in the Super Bowl, and get those free yards. When you're spreading it out, if it's on a second down or third down, you have McCaffrey out of the backfield, if Kittle's, part of the route, and you have three other receivers, you can really put stress on a defense. Just pick up, 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, nothing's there. Run, whether it's up the middle or off tackle, 5, 7, 10, 12 yards. It's going to be there. I totally agree with Steve. I would just come down on the number. Another quote, look, Brock knows he's not Allen or Jackson, but he can be a threat, and I think that threat needs to come out more this year. I should have probably read that before I went to my analysis. And then here was actually something interesting. I'll get to the quote momentarily. Because Purdy does not have the strongest arm, the Packers knew that Purdy had to process quickly and get rid of the ball. Young was told the Green Bay defense in the playoffs was coached to run to where Purdy was looking because they knew he was not going to remain in the pocket for slow developing routes. Now, this is kind of interesting. How quickly a defender can diagnose where a quarterback is looking when they're getting the ball out in under 2.5 seconds. That's why they're professional football players. Some can do it better than others. But here's the quote from Steve Young that kind of crystallizes the why for what I just read. Quote, Brock has to process even faster and the ball has to come out even sooner because the longer the play goes, the further people get away, essentially, meaning he doesn't have the strongest arm in the world. So those longer developing plays, those shot plays, he's not going to be throwing it 55 yards on a line like Allen or Mahomes can. Though everyone remember, though, Brock took his shots in the Super Bowl. And we're not talking about, again, it's not 50 yards on a line, but when the Niners were going from left to right, it might have been the second or third quarter, threw a bomb to Aiyuk. They weren't on the same page where Aiyuk was coming out of like an out and up, overthrew him by a couple yards. Overthrew Debo when they were going from right to left at the top of the screen, kind of threw it out of the end zone as Purdy was rolling right. And then obviously the one, Niners going again right to left, where he threw a 40-yard pass to Debo again, and Trent McDuffie knocked it away. It's not that Brock doesn't have that ability. He can throw the ball 50 yards, guys. Let's not say that he can't. The ball that he threw to Aiyuk was 45 or 50 yards that went off the Lions' helmet. But because he doesn't have the strongest arm in the world, what Young is saying is it may cause him to process faster and get rid of the ball faster. And that's where the Niners eat. They live on short to intermediate routes. But Brock also is the highest rated quarterback in passes traveling over 20 yards. And granted, 20 yards isn't 50 yards. I get it. He's not throwing the ball 50, 55, 60 yards downfield. But that's why it's a West Coast offense also. And he's playing into that. Shanahan's offense plays into Brock's superpower of processing, and it's not sexy. Brains are not sexy. Ask anyone who starred in the Revenge of the Nerds movies. It's not sexy. But I thought Steve Young had some really interesting thoughts there that I wanted to share. So that's going to conclude the 49ers section of the podcast. Always want to thank you for listening, but please stick around in the plus section. We're going to be going over the Acolyte Season 1, The Boys Season 4, and Cobra Kai Season 6 Part 1. Have some reviews and thoughts on all three. Please stay with us.
It's plus time.
So a good week for streaming TV, at least for me, in terms of shows that I'm watching, seasons that are wrapping up, and a final season that kicked off. And let's go over them in the order that they aired. So Star Wars, The Acolyte on Disney Plus. Such a divisive show with the fans. Keep saying it. No one hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans do. It's really unfortunate. Overall, I'm going to start here. To me, this is the third or fourth best live action show that Disney put out for Star Wars. And you can call them tiers. Tier 1 is Andor and The Mandalorian. Tier 2 is The Acolyte and Ahsoka. Tier 3 is Obi-Wan Kenobi and the Book of Boba Fett. People that are hating on this show, I think, are doing it for all the wrong reasons. Or they like to be hate mongers, or they have their own YouTube channels and they monetize displeasure and bitching about things. And have I complained about Star Wars in the past? And I probably will have some nitpicks and complaints here. It's not going to be all, me, praising the show. Yeah, of course. It's my favorite sci-fi/fantasy franchise, followed closely by Harry Potter. So I have thoughts and feelings. I am intellectually and emotionally invested in the Star Wars universe based on growing up with it. Toys I've bought and played with and still have that, I know how much they're worth and I'm probably never going to sell them. So they're technically not worth anything. Comic books I've collected and am still collecting, and entirely too many novels that I've read, the majority of them that are part of the now defunct canon. So my overall thoughts about Star Wars usually are, well, when it comes to the sequel trilogy, episodes 7, 8, or 9, they could have went another route, a different route. I've read so many books that I thought this or that could have been a more interesting story than what we ultimately got from J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson. Was I entertained? Yes. Do I think it could have been better? Yes. The Acolyte, that's how I feel about this show. I was entertained. Is it perfect? No, but this show feels like Star Wars. It's light-hearted fantasy. Right? It's nothing that you have to think too deeply about, even though this show was a mystery, more so really than anything else that Star Wars has put out, maybe aside from the whole who is Rey that started with J.J. Abrams' mystery box in episode 7 and was answered by J.J. Abrams in episode 9, but who knows if that was what was intended as the story evolved. But the fact that there was a mystery that folks got to discuss and dissect on social media, the ones that weren't assholes about it, but having fun in terms of who are the twins, Osha and May, who is the dark side stranger? Is he an apprentice? Is he the master? What happened on Brendok when the Jedi went there to try to save the twins and only came away with May? All those were answered in the season 1 finale because creator, writer, director, showrunner Leslie Headland, and I want to give her a round of applause. I think she had the unenviable task of creating something for Star Wars in general, which people are going to jump on you, shit on you. The fact that she was a woman did it. The fact that she's a gay woman and did it. Like which is so sad to say, right? The deck was stacked against her from the jump. But everything I've read and interviews I've listened to her, she feels nothing but grateful. The fact that she's like, this is something I grew up with, that I loved reading about, the expanded universe, what George did, what others did, and I get to play in this sandbox. Like, I still can't, pinch me. I still can't believe I'm awake and doing this and had this opportunity. And there were times where there was articles that were released at the after each episode aired that she explained things. She just seems like such a genuinely good fan. I'm sure a good person, but I don't know. Obviously, I don't know her personally, but such a good fan that she understands the responsibility, but not taking it too seriously. There's no agenda here. It's not woke because the lead characters are female. That's okay. More than half of the population of the world is female. Guys, it might be like 52-48 or 55-45. But it's okay to have more female representation in terms of lead characters, since Star Wars up until the sequel trilogy really focused on male characters more outside of Princess Leia. But the fact that this was a mystery, there were multiple Jedi cover-ups that were discussed and uncovered throughout the story. You had other Force beings, witches, who used the Force in a different way, that had different powers where they can evaporate and transport themselves, not dissimilar to what the witches of Dathomir could do. And Leslie Headland said she took some inspiration from that, but wanted to make the witches in the Acolyte different. Yet a bunch of Jedi deaths, and figuring that was going to happen, leading into that, the whole statement in The Phantom Menace that the Sith have been extinct for a millennium, gave you that Rogue One feeling that everybody has to die, or at least the main characters. And they did. All of the main Jedi characters outside of Master Vistara died. Leslie Headland expanded the lore. She brought cortosis, that material that composed of the stranger's helmet and his wrist guards, into live action that was part of video games and books before, and Legends books that had other characters that I'm going to talk about. She was diligent enough with her and her team of writers to mine the expanded universe, old and new, and pull out cool stuff like this from it. Introducing a new sect of Force witches, looking at the Jedi in a way of they're supposed to be the bastions of light and hope and the quintessential good guys, but they're human. Well, not all of them are human, but they're fallible. They could be obstinate and pig-headed and still think they're doing the right thing for the wrong reasons or in the wrong way, which is what Saul experienced in trying to take Osha and cover up what happened on Brendok, which was Saul and Carrie-Anne Moss's character lying to the council about what happened to the witches. The fact that there was a vergence on that planet, either the planet itself or through the witches channeling the Force, could create life. Now, I don't think they completely explained the whole, when Saul told Osha and May that they're not two people, that they were one. I mean, that's technically how twins happen, right? The embryo splits, and however this happened chemically, because it was mentioned that the Zabrak mother, the mother with the horns, was the one that carried the girls. But it's interesting that the girls were dark-skinned, like the other mother, and none of the two girls had horns at all. Put fans in an uproar about, does this mean Anakin is not the chosen one? He was the one that was born of the Force. And no, go back and watch the movies. Qui-Gon said that Anakin himself was a virgin in the Force. If I'm remembering that correctly, I could very well be wrong. Whereas the girls aren't a virgins, but something on the planet or the planet itself was, which is probably why the witches or the two mother leaders could create the two girls, and they became twins for whatever reason. And the biggest thing that we got in the finale, and again, it's attention to detail and knowing what the fans have wanted to see since essentially 2005, Revenge of the Sith, bringing Darth Plagueis to live action. And it was a quick cameo on the island. You see him peeking out and spying on Khmer and Osha. And Leslie Headland did verify in an interview that Darth Plagueis is Khmer's master. It wasn't stated in the show. She said it after the fact. You're bringing in a character that was mentioned in episode 3. There's a novel, it's defunct now, called Darth Plagueis, one of the best Star Wars novels you could read or listen to. It's not the canon backstory of Plagueis and Darth Tenebrous and Darth Venomous and how Palpatine apprenticed himself to Darth Plagueis. Maybe that will become a great Disney Plus show. I mean, you know how it's going to end, but hopefully maybe that's where season 2 is going to go in a bit. If there's a season 2 at all, and Leslie Headland has not heard if there's going to be a season 2, and she's come out and said, I haven't heard yet. I didn't want to leave story threads completely dangling, so I wanted to wrap up as much as I could season 1, knowing that season 2 is not a guarantee. Now, Ahsoka, that came out, was it last year, 2023? It took a couple months before that season 2 got announced. So there is time. And I am hoping for a season 2. I enjoyed seeing the Jedi in this time period. I enjoyed seeing them screw up multiple times. Enjoyed seeing the Sith in a different way. And the fanboy in me was super excited to see that Darth Plagueis is real. Because and some fans thought, well, in that opera scene in Revenge of the Sith, Darth Sidious was just saying that to Anakin to lure him to the dark side, that he wasn't real, that he wasn't really Palpatine's master. I mean, Star Wars isn't that deep. He was real. He was Palpatine's master, and we're going to see now what, that relationship with Kamir could be if they get a season 2, and I'm really hoping they do. You just got to bring down the production cost. I mean, if you're giving us 8, 30, 35-minute episodes, it shouldn't cost $180 million. If you can cut that to maybe 120, and I'm sure it could be done. If Godzilla -1 could be made for $15 million, you could make essentially 4 hours worth of content for $120 million. Just hire those people. But if it's on the chopping block, then I would just say, why not a cinematic movie as season 2? Be tough to maybe wrap up, and tough to wrap up maybe the entire story in a 2.5 hour movie, but that's where Mandalorian is going, right? Mandalorian and Grogu is now going to be a movie instead of season 4. And I think Mandalorian season 3 wrapped itself up pretty well. Remember, it ended with the Mandalorian and Grogu kind of on a farm chilling, like, not that they were done with the world, but like they set out what they wanted to do. Got Grogu to a Jedi and Luke. Grogu didn't want to stay there. The Mandalorian got to help the Mandalorian people in Bo-Katan, did their stuff. Now they're kind of living in that pseudo father-son relationship in a house on a backwater planet. But why not a movie? I mean, at the least, Disney wouldn't lose money off of it. If a movie costs $150 million to make, that means it would need to make $375 million worldwide to start breaking even. I think The Acolyte could do that. I don't think it would shit itself the way that Solo did. I think because people that even hate it, that did not like it, and they still watched it like assholes. Why would anyone keep watching something or doing something that they don't like just to bitch about it online? That's why people are assholes, and far too many people are assholes. But even these assholes would see it because it's Star Wars, and then they can complain on various message boards and social platforms about the movie that they saw and that they wasted $12 and blah, blah, blah. Disney ruined my childhood, blah, 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 blah. But at least that could offset. If they're worried about cost, a movie, and just because it's a movie doesn't mean you have to ratchet up the production value to make it cinematic. Anything that we saw on Disney Plus, if you pasted it together in its 4 hours and cut in half, they would have been very worthy to be two-hour movies in cinemas. Don't give me this extra shit. Well, if it's a movie, you have to have better set pieces and polish it up and more action scenes and more special effects. No, you don't. You don't have to write a story to fit the silver screen. You just have to write a goddamn story and how you want to finish it. So if this was 4 hours worth of content, if you're not counting intros or credits, do it again. And if it costs $180 million, split it into 2 goddamn movies and release them in back-to-back years, the way that the Lord of the Rings were released in 2001, 2002, and 2003. Why not? And I think Leslie Headland can finish telling her story, and a story that is a bridge, a very long bridge to episode 1, The Phantom Menace, but it is playing in a time period that fans have interest in. I think fans are interested more in what's going on. Well, no. I think the biggest interest is what happened between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. And we're actually getting comic books that are going to be released in October that are going to detail the Battle of Jakku and what happened after that, which should be pretty cool. But now that you're going to give us Plagueis, and it means you might give us a young Palpatine, or you might give us another Darth Tenebrous or Darth Venomous, who might be Kumir, the Stranger, the Sith person now, because he was able to put a potion together. That's venomous. A potion could be poisonous. Like, there's a really logical connection there, right? Do it as a movie. I'll gladly plunk down my $12 to watch 2 more Acolyte movies. Gladly. Haters be damned. Now, The Boys on Amazon Prime, season 4 concluded. A good season finale. Good use of Nirvana in the last minute and a half, 2 minutes, where the main characters, the quote-unquote good guys of The Boys, find themselves in a world of shit and are basically all captured except for Starlight, and Homelander, played by Anthony Starr, is almost the de facto president of the United States, or the president is just a puppet. The problem, and The Boys, even this season, got good reviews. And I understand the type of show it is. It's over the top, gross out situations, gross out humor, intense adult situation stuff. And when you look at it in that frame, it's gotten good reviews on Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb, and fans like it. And I generally like it as well. Whenever season 5 comes out, I actually saw earlier today, maybe in 2026, that would suck. But whenever it comes out, of course, I'll watch it. But each season feels like it's an exercise in, can you top this, from a, what the fuck was that scene? That was gross, going in, up a guy's ass or in their dick or fucking an octopus. Like, I am not a prude. I have a mouth on me. I grew up with all of Kevin Smith's, movies, Clerks, Mallrats, Chasing Amy. And that's like super, gross at times, vulgar, cursing. Like, it's my wheelhouse. It completely is. But every season just felt like it was upping the ridiculousness or the crazy shit quotient. And I don't think you need to. I think The Boys works best, like the season finale, when it was fucking grounded in something that actually moved the plot forward and wasn't absurd. I mean, granted, this whole thing is absurd. It's fantasy, right? It's superheroes. You can inject V into you and become a superhero yourself. And now Butcher's character has tentacles coming out of his chest. Like, there's a baseline absurdity to it. But because of that baseline absurdity, I don't think you need to add all that much more to it. And it feels like, the relationship with Homelander and his son, with Butcher and his stepson, or whatever you want to call him, however they're related. I guess they're not related at all. With Starlight and Huey and his dad, like, when it was actually human and felt more like it should be a drama or a dramedy with elements of ridiculousness or absurdity or over the topness. The formula is flipped. It's just fucking ridiculous and over the top with sprinkled in, grounded elements of actual drama and humanity. And I guess maybe it's no surprise why I'm, dropping F-bombs or whatever as I'm reviewing it, because maybe I'm just kind of playing into the how they're setting up the story. But I think it could be, I don't want to say taken a bit more seriously, because you really can't take any of it seriously, but I think it could be more impactful, more meaningful. just dialing that nonsense back a bit. Now, in terms of just two quick things, like they did not, the writers were always kind of towing the whole Republican MAGA Homelander is like a super duper ridiculous asshole version of Trump. But this episode, they made no bones about, making America super again and Homelander, being the right hand of the president. Like they were more subtle, and they weren't really ever subtle about it, but they were more subtle about it than this season. And then the finale, I'm not going to say gave the middle finger to the Republican Party. It's a satire. It's a farce. But I wonder how many people that are like ardent Republicans out there or ardent, MAGA people out there aren't watching this and enjoying it and having fun and not realizing, like, in a way, dude, if you think this is funny, the joke's on you. Because you ardent, and I'm not trying to get too political here, but you ardent MAGA people that are wearing bandages on your ear to the Republican National Convention and kind of worship Trump as some sort of demigod and basically are a cult within the larger Republican Party, on your knees, sucking at the fountain of Trump. That's you, guys. That's you. And I have no political affiliation. The Republicans and Democrats in a lot of ways are equally as ridiculous. The difference is there's no one who ever worshipped a Biden, an Obama, a Bill Clinton, the way that some of the quote unquote crazies worship Trump. And you see the crazies on the boys that are all about Homelander and don't care that he kills people. And like, it's a straight up MAGA parallel that I find amusing. And if MAGA proponents don't realize that, then that makes it even funnier to me. So again, wasn't trying to get political. I'm not pro Trump, pro Biden, pro Harris, whoever the Democrats are going to put out there. Doesn't matter. I've said before and I said it again. The last 6 elections, I voted Democrat and Republican evenly. I'm not pointing fingers at anything. I'm just saying this show made no bones about who they were making fun of. Okay, and real quick, lastly, Erin Moriarty, Starlight. It doesn't matter to me. I will never meet her. I doubt it. I'll never fuck her. Like, it doesn't matter. Did she have facial work done or not? She could have, through stress or whatever, lost weight and just made her face, thinner and more angular. All of us in our 20s or however old she might be actually 30, but we kind of lose that young baby fat and we thin out over time. But boy, it does look like that she's had some facial work done. And while it doesn't matter, her like defying it and being obstinate about it or being, considered hurt by it, if she in fact did have it, is absurd. You're an actress in Hollywood. Almost everybody has work done to some degree. Just admit it. No one cares. No one cares. But just kind of throw that out there. I know it's been, bandied about, and you could look up before and after pictures from like 2 years ago to this season, and her face does look different, but again, everybody's face looks different 2 years ago. A lot of people between 2 years now, especially if you lose weight. But now let's transition. So Cobra Kai, Netflix, season 6, part 1 dropped, 5 episodes. It's been an entertaining show. It's so interesting that it's found such a large sweet spot in terms of demographics, because it's absolutely plays to 80s kids like myself, and even maybe like older people that are a little bit older, that watched The Karate Kid, grew up watching them, enjoyed those movies. So you have the nostalgia Gen X folks right there. And then you have young kids and teenagers, because there's no there really isn't really any cursing, very rare, that it deals with high school kids. It's, teen angst and fighting and over the top comedy and stuff. So you are running from like 10 years old to maybe 50 in terms of what the demographic for Cobra Kai is. And kudos to the folks that adapted it, and maybe they weren't really trying to do this, because remember, this launched on YouTube Red before it was picked up by Netflix. But this is essentially a CW show. This is essentially now, or the past couple seasons, or maybe right from the start, it's a teen soap opera. The characters are manufacturing drama. The writers are manufacturing ways for there basically to be a fight, a karate fight every single episode, even if they're not training. Someone has a problem with someone else and you got to fight it out and then we're good. And all right, cool. Johnny Lawrence fighting Mike Barnes. All right, we're good. All right, we're going to fight. Now we're good. Mike Barnes, by the way, who was obviously in Karate Kid Part 3, 57 years old. He looks at least 15 years younger, at least. And he may dye his hair. He has kind of a close cut, and his hair looks generally all brown. I'm sure he does dye it, but in terms of how he aged, now Ralph Macchio I think is 60, and William Zabka's late 50s as well. The actor who plays Mike Barnes looks great, man. And I looked up his IMDb profile. He was on a couple different soap operas for more than a decade. And I think he's still on one. I forget which one it is, but God, whatever he's eating and drinking, God bless him. And I bring him up because the issues that I have with Cobra Kai are fundamental storytelling issues that I cannot believe were overlooked or allowed to happen. So Mike Barnes appears in episode 4 as a way to be an impartial judge on which 6 fighters from the Miyagi Fang or whatever they're calling themselves dojo is going to make it to that international tournament in Spain. And, they say that about 5 minutes into the episode, Johnny, or 3 minutes into the episode, Johnny has a different, they have the same 3 or 4, but the last 1 or 2, they're different. And they're oh, I wish we had some sort of an impartial person that could help us pick the 6. And I'm sitting there going, what about Chosen? The 3rd sensei from Okinawa that's been living with you, Daniel LaRusso, for months. And at the end of the previous episode 3, Chosen is sitting on a bed and looking at his phone for flights to Okinawa, suggesting that he would go back. But in episode 4 and episode 5, Chosen's name is not mentioned once. All they had to do in the beginning of episode 4 was for Johnny or Daniel to say, oh man, I really wish Chosen didn't go back to Okinawa so, he could be our tie-breaking vote for the 6th. That's all you had to say, writers, whatever. And that bothered me the whole episode and episode 5. And I don't even say, it's not a stupid thing. It's not a stupid thing. It's a storytelling failure. You can't tell me that the scene of him looking at his phone, considering going to Okinawa, is good enough, and you don't mention Chosen's name at all in episodes 4 and 5 at all. Did not acknowledge him, his presence, or the fact that he was there for months previously at all. On a smaller scale, the Kenny, the African American character who was with Cobra Kai and Robbie was trying to get him back to Miyagi-Do, gets, part of a competition to see who would be in the last, 2 spots, gets wound up giving a laxative and does not complete the task. And he winds up almost shitting his pants in episode 5, or I don't know if he actually did shit them or was right near a porta potty. Either way, that happens in episode 5. He doesn't say anything about oh, I'm out, I'm not going to come back to train anymore. In episode 6, everybody comes to Mr. Miyagi's old house to train everybody, even the people that are not going to Okinawa, because the 6 have been chosen. I'm sorry, going to Barcelona, Spain. The 6 have been chosen at this point. Everybody's there but Kenny. Kenny's not mentioned, not talked about, not even considered for one of the open spots when a spot, I think, opens up and Hawk winds up going. Because Tori, one of the female characters, decides to leave or storms out because her mother passes away. That's another storytelling failure. Had a very well-acted scene by Peyton List and emotional about her mother dying, and she's in the hospital and the doctor's talking to her and Tori's telling the doctor, you said she was getting better, and the mother developed a pulmonary embolism and wound up dying. And Tori storms away from the doctor, and the doctor asks, is there anybody that we can call? And she says, no one. But in episode 6, or I guess that might have happened in episode 6 also, or episode 5 rather, when Tori has to fight Samantha LaRusso as to be the female captain, the hospital calls Daniel LaRusso's wife and lets her know what happened to Tori's mother, which is impossible based on what we saw in the show, because Tori said there is no one else to contact. There's no way the doctor would have known that Daniel LaRusso's wife should have been contacted. And of course, the hospital contacts her at that exact moment when Tori and Sam are fighting. Again, teen soap opera, ridiculous, but storytelling failure. And lastly, when they actually get to Barcelona, every dojo that's there has 6 fighters. Cobra Kai enters with John Kreese and the female sensei that he's working with. 3 male fighters walk in, and then the last one that walks in is Tori as the female. So if you can do that simple math on your one hand, Cobra Kai has 4 fighters, whereas everybody else has 6. Why you couldn't show 2 other fighters walk in, have your 5, and then have Tori being the 6th? You could have had like 5 walk in and not even, shoot it at such an angle where you don't even realize that they only have 5, that it's only 6. It was very apparent that there was 3. There was 3 and a gap. So you know that there's more coming. And then the 2 senseis. Now there's speculation that maybe Kenny is going to be one of the last 2 fighters. I don't know. I don't get, whatever, because he was absent from episode 6. But I know when you're dealing with like a soap opera type of show like this, like a Days of Our Lives or whatever the heck that's on, during the day, that you're obviously not to take it too seriously. You're supposed to have fun with it. And I am having fun with it. My son's watching it. It's an entertaining and quick 30 or 35 minutes. But these 4 things that happened in the last 2 episodes were so glaring and could have been resolved so easily that I don't understand why what was shown to us or put out there on Netflix, other than they thought that they could maybe resolve it in editing, but then they really couldn't, and they were stuck with whatever they had, but they could have gone back and do a reshoot, or especially the Chosen scene. It just could have been dealt with in a voiceover, or just reshooting Daniel and Johnny in the dealership talking about, the tiebreaker and Chosen being there. Like it would have been just such an easy fix. Listen, Cobra Kai, fun, but you can have a fun bubblegum, popcorn, teenage soap opera, CW type show and not have such glaring storytelling errors in it. Now, the next 5 episodes don't come out until November. So that's 4 months from now. And then the last 5 don't come out until early 2025. But that, I think, is because they also, I believe, just wrapped shooting on a Cobra Kai movie. And they may not call it Cobra Kai, they may call it something. And they might not want the end of the Netflix series to happen, and then there'd be such a time gap in real life, in our lives, between the end of the series and the movie. So maybe this is just me guessing, and maybe they're not done shooting the movie. I'm not sure. I thought I read something that they were, or maybe just started, whatever. But to me, it feels like they're pulsing out these 5 episodes to maybe bridge that gap between the show and the movie. But that concludes the 49ers Plus podcast for today. We had a long one, a lot of content, hopefully a lot of good or at least entertaining content, both in the 49ers and Plus section. Like always, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to make us part of your listening routine. Training camp starting today for the 49ers. Next week, we are going to be just discussing training camp battles on defense and obviously anything else that's noteworthy coming out of training camp. And I use noteworthy in air quotes because it's noteworthy to Grant Cohn and his cronies, but maybe not to us normal people. But whatever is worth talking about, we certainly will, in addition to hopefully some Plus content as well. But between now and then, whatever you are doing, stay happy, stay healthy, and stay safe, and we will talk soon. Take care.